What's up, sports fans? My name is Lucas Weiss, host of the Weesesports Chronicles podcast. We got a great episode for you today with Jeff Marek. He is a host for the National Hockey League on Rogers Sportsnet, as well as the co-host of 31 Thoughts, the podcast. In this episode, I chat with Jeff about a variety of different topics, including his favorite Curtis Joseph memory, his early memories of Maple Leaf Gardens, to what's going to happen with junior hockey in 2021, as well as what he's learned as a broadcaster amidst a global pandemic. We didn't have much time with Jeff, but we'll certainly have Jeff back on in the new year because he is a treasure trove of stories, but we wanted to make the most of our time with Jeff Marek, one of Sportsnet's top hockey journalists. The Weesports Chronicles podcast is available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So make sure to like, rate, watch, and subscribe to all three of those channels. Now let's get to today's episode with Jeff Marek on the Weesports Chronicles podcast. All right, as I said off the top, I'm pleased to be joined by Jeff Marek. He is an NHL host for Rogers Sportsnet. He's the co-host of 31 Thoughts, the podcast with Elliot Friedman. And he's a staple.
Better looking of the two.
Of course. And he's also a staple at the Stouffville Arena, home of the Stouffville Spirit. Jeff, welcome to the Weesports Chronicles podcast.
Yeah, Lucas, how you doing, buddy? Glad to be aboard. And you know, one of the interesting things about sports media right now is we're all doing it from home.
Yeah.
And the general shot that you see, no matter whether it's anyone from Sportsnet or TSN or ESPN or anywhere. Usually there's a lot of books behind you, so you can sort of screen cap and see, okay, what's so-and-so reading. I'm loving your background, though. First of all, you're a pretty dyed-in-the-wool Toronto anythings fan. That moment over your left shoulder with Joe Carter, probably, for my money, the greatest sports moment
of course
in the history of in the history of Toronto sports. But if I can flip the script here and play host for us.
Yes.
Describe your love of Cujo, and what else do you have behind you right now?
Well, listen, I mean, Cujo, we actually are good family friends. So Cujo's kids went to my alma mater high school for a little bit, the Country Day School in Keene, Ontario. So we know Cujo and the family quite well. We actually saw him at Rogers Hometown Hockey a couple years ago back in Aurora, which I'm living in right now. And then, just a few. I mean, I went to a Super Bowl a couple years ago, so I have a Super Bowl hat. I went to a PGA championship a couple years back, covered that, and then got some Toronto Raptors stuff because, of course, I wasn't born in 1993. So I was, so I've just known these moments from just watching video. And then, so the Raptors for me is sort of like that moment of just, the country coming together and just, incredible energy. And then I'm a big tennis fan. So this is something that my brother did, many years back, and it's just sort of stayed in the office. So, yeah. It's
my favorite Curtis Joseph, because that was a big Curtis Joseph.
Yeah.
How could you not be a Curtis Joseph? Wonderful goaltender. Real nice man, too. So this story was told to me by Bill Waters. Former assistant general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I hosted a radio show, Leafs Lunch, with him for a number of years on AM 640. And he told me the story when they were doing the Curtis Joseph negotiations. Now, it's funny you mentioned Raptors, because at this time, it was Vince Mania.
Yeah.
Vince Carter was everything. But still, like, the Maple Leafs are the big money draw in Toronto.
Of course.
As people at the organization will say, it's called Maple Leaf Square, not Raptor Square, for a reason. The big money maker here is still the hockey team. So he would have been represented by Don Meehan and Newport Sports.
Yep.
And so Billy tells me he's having a conversation with Meehan, and the conversation goes like this. He says, as Don Meehan, Billy, what franchise brings in more money, the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Toronto Raptors? And Billy says, well, the Maple Leafs are still the number one draw here. Don't expect that to change anytime soon. He said, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. So he said, so who do you think brings in more money to MLSE? My client, Curtis Joseph, or Vince Carter? And Bill says, well, probably Curtis Joseph. Again, the Maple Leafs are the big money driver here. And Don Meehan says, okay, that's good. We'll sign for the exact same amount as Vince Carter then. Thank you very much. And I was like, that is one of the more creative discussions around an NHL player's contract that I've ever heard, using a comparable from basketball, albeit one in the same market, two teams owned by the same company. But I thought that was one of the more creative things I ever heard. I'm sure Curtis knows that. Knows that story. But using Vince Carter as a contract comparable, that was a new one on me. But good for Don Meehan for trying it. I think Vince was making like $15 or $20 million at the time.
Well, this is why I bring you on, Jeff. Just a treasure trove of stories. I'll tell you one Curtis Joseph story that you'll find funny. So I was, of course, his kids, went to my school, the Country Day School in Keene for many years. And when I was like in grade 2, I remember I just finished the day at school, and my mom was, I was going to my mom's car, and she was talking to Curtis, and and of course I'm the big hockey fan, Curtis, wow, and great seeing you, and I bring up in grade 2 the Doug Gilmour goal, the wraparound goal in grade 2, the wraparound. And it was sort of the moment where I'm like, okay, maybe this career of sports media should be something I should consider going into. Already asking the tough questions back then, and Curtis just like smiled and said, I think many years later, Doug gave me like a poster of that goal, and just just to rib back and forth. But no, he was, Curtis is just such a nice guy, and even back then. So it was just funny that you mentioned that story of Curtis, and I thought I'd bring that up because, boy, even back in grade 2, I was already getting under some people's skin.
That's well, first of all, great journalistic instinct at grade 2. I think when I was in grade 2, this is the generation gap between us. I was never much of an artist, but I could trace real good.
Yeah.
I think I would have been tracing goalie masks of Mike Palmetier and Wayne Thomas and Doug Favell. That's about as hard hitting as I got in grade 2. But good for you for asking the question about the wrapper. I'm like, what are you thinking? You got to play the post.
Yeah. No, of course, but it definitely produced one of the more memorable Toronto Maple Leafs moments. But
loud building, eh?
Oh, my goodness! I mean, the Maple Leaf Gardens. What memories do you have? I mean, I'll ask you that. I mean, the Gardens, of course. I mean, for us, growing up, it's been the Air Canada Centre, now Scotiabank Arena, but I'm sure you must remember that historic place, because I've been in the Gardens for a few things, but it's now a grocery store as well as the Ryerson hockey rink. But it must bring back a lot of great memories for you.
Sure does. First thing, I mean, my dad would take me to not only games there, but pro wrestling. And I always looked at Maple Leaf Gardens as not just a venue, and it was great for concerts too. It's tons of concerts, but I always associated Maple Leaf Gardens with hockey games and also professional wrestling. But even before you walked in, like I can remember always, walking up the steps from the subway, and the first thing you smell are the chestnuts, right? Like that's it, and the popcorn from the street vendors. So that's like, okay, I've always associated that smell with being close to Maple Leaf Gardens. And then, the hockey players coming out of the exit in the back of the Gardens on Wood Street and waiting there for autographs and chasing Daryl Sittler to the parking lot, and Boria Salming and Earl Thompson and all these guys, Ian Turnbull and these types of players. But I grew up there watching not only Maple Leafs games, but my first love is junior hockey, and the Toronto Marlboros used to do double headers where you would get buy one get one free. You'd buy a Maple Leafs ticket and get to go watch the Marlboros play in the afternoon. And so I'm trying to think who the main guys would have been there. Maybe Bruce Dowie, the goaltender, who I always thought was going to be huge because it's so great with the Marlboros, but staying for double headers there. But going to Toronto Toros games as well in the old WHA. I still remember my first one. And John Garrett, and I always bug John about this because it makes him feel old. John Garrett was in net. I think he was in net, and Wayne Wood might have been the other goaltender. It was a Toronto Calgary game, the Calgary Cowboys against the Toronto Toros. But yeah, to me it was hockey, not just at the NHL level, but also WHA and then OHA, now OHL. And professional wrestling. And I would go, once a month with my dad, sometimes twice a month, because every now and then the Sheik would run a show. His promotion was basically headquartered in Detroit, and he would bring up for a Sunday afternoon every now and then, the Sheik versus Bobo Brazil, or it would be Sheik versus Andre, if he would roll around town. But those I always associated with those two events. Later on, I started to go to concerts at Maple Leaf Gardens, but I loved it. I cannot to this day look at two things and not think of the Gardens. One is Frutella, which everyone knows now is, well, it's like the forerunner of Starburst candies,
Yep.
and Fresca, because Maple Leaf Gardens was the only place you could get Fresca. And I remember I always get there. We get like these little these like 8x10, like 5x7 hockey cards. When you walk in, I would try to collect all the Maple Leafs, and my dad would take me to buy Frutella and Fresca. And you can't mention Maple Leaf Gardens as a male and not reference the troughs in the men's room. That's right. Treating us like livestock every time we had to have a squirt. No individual urinals, just one big trough going all the way around the bathroom. That's how Harold felt about his customers. Harold Ballard, the old owner.
You mentioned junior hockey, and certainly one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Jeff. And you're someone that's so in tune not just with the NHL, but also a lot of the other leagues, junior hockey as well. And look, this year's been incredibly challenging, and of course trying to get leagues started up is seen as quite a challenge given the pandemic. So I'm just curious, what are you hearing just in terms of just the league, some of the other leagues right now, and just some of the conversations that are going on? Because obviously, the pandemic is ravaging and still, affecting a lot of people. But these leagues, need to start to get players some playing time.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not breaking news with you here, Lucas. Like, it's a mess.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows. Quebec started, but then they had to get shut down. They're planning to get going again in January, but I can't see it. The Western Hockey League, postponed their debut for the season, pushing it from January into February, where the OHL has their fingers crossed. Maybe they can get things going, but more and more the whispers are, are they going to be able to do this? We had Corey Stillman on Hockey Central earlier on this week, and Corey, now ex-head coach of the Sudbury Wolves, takes over the assistant coaching duties with the Arizona Coyotes under Rick Tocchet. And one of the things he slipped in there, and anyone who follows junior hockey, this was a bomb. For anyone else, it's just part of a casual conversation. We were talking about, why making the transition, why taking the NHL job now, specifically considering, your son Chase plays with the Sudbury Wolves and it's his draft year. It seems like a unique time to bolt, considering you're helping to shepherd him through his draft year. And, he sort of stuck it in there and then moved along. He said, look, we don't even know if there's going to be a season. And for someone who's, I guess, now an ex-OHL coach, even to slide that in, because no one talks like that publicly. They do privately, I assure you, Lucas. Like every conversation with every GM, every coach, every owner that I've ever had this season, as it relates to any team in the CHL, it's, we're not sure if we can do this. We're not sure if this is going to happen. So the very latest is, it's still a big question mark. We really don't know. But as each day goes on, Lucas, there's more and more skepticism whether or not they're even going to be able to get something going. So, and no one is even whispering anything about the Memorial Cup. Like, there have been some ideas like, we'll do like 8 teams in the OHL, and that'll be like the top 8 teams, and we'll play a tournament, and those teams will go. People come up with ideas, but right now, the pandemic is in charge, and these kids and these club teams, 60 CHL teams, are just reacting to it.
Yeah, the pandemic being in charge, the virus dictating what happens, I think, is certainly a theme of 2020, right? And we've all had to adjust in certain ways. And for you, Jeff, you've had a long, successful broadcasting career, doing a lot of different things. I'm just curious what you've learned about yourself and just in terms of being a broadcaster and a journalist during these unprecedented times.
Oh wow, that's a great question. What have I learned about myself? I've learned that I'm a better broadcaster if I'm not just 24/7 hockey. Like, I always believed that I had to fill every single moment of my life with some type of research about hockey, because that's my focus, damn it. And if I'm not reading a book or watching a video or having a conversation about hockey, I'm going to be less of a performer. The opposite is true. Trust me, the more varied your interests are, the more things you can bring to a broadcast. But honestly, like I really sort of try to go out of my way to make sure that concrete doesn't harden around me, and that I don't fix opinions about things, and without leaving any wiggle room to change my mind. So that's sort of remained constant. But I think the one thing that I've probably learned about myself is that, you can still be the same broadcaster in a narrow field, even if you're not making that the entire focus of your life. As a matter of fact, you're probably better if you're not. Like, I went into the Dan Carlin podcast
Mm.
this year. Carlin's a hero, man. Like, I love Dan. I've listened to every single moment of every podcast he's ever done. Like, honestly, Lucas, it was like winning podcast fantasy game going on that, and it involved a lot of prep before I did it. I follow baseball now
Mm.
more than I ever have. I'm interested in a lot of different things that I think I'm allowing myself to be interested in, because I feel that it will probably make me a better broadcaster when this whole thing is over, and when I can go back to the studio and look across and see the ugly faces of Elliot Friedman and Brian Burke. How about that?
That's some great advice. And I know we don't have much time with you, Jeff, but I gotta ask you one last question, and then I'll let you go.
Sure.
I mentioned the Stouffville Arena off the top, and the Stouffville Spirit. Do you have a memorable moment, in that arena that that you'd like to share?
Family. That's where my kids learned to play hockey. That's
Wow.
where my kids, Timbits hockey players. It's funny. I was driving my 2012 to hockey practice the other day, and he just turns to me and says, "Remember getting up Saturday mornings at 6 o'clock? I don't miss that." So
No kidding.
for me, Stouffville Arena is where our two boys learned to play hockey. First joined their teams, got cut from teams, made teams, had fun, made friends. Maybe our daughter, who's 4, will follow in their footsteps as well. But yeah, I mean, listen, some great times watching Stouffville Spirit hockey. Shout out Kenny Burrows and
Yep.
and Stouffville Spirit. Yeah, for me, that ring's always going to be where our two boys learn how to play hockey.
Jeff Marek is a Sportsnet host with the NHL. He's the co-host, like I said, of 31 Thoughts, the podcast. Better looking, yes. And Jeff, I hope that this is the first of many times you come on the podcast, because like I said, you're a treasure trove of stories, and I'm excited to have you on down the road. But wishing you and yours all the best for the holidays, and thanks so much for joining me today on the Weesports Chronicles podcast.
You got a bright future, sir. Wish you all the best, and health and happiness, specifically health, over the holidays. Thanks, and you back anytime, Lucas.